So as mentioned, this is part 1. Now likely we'll have 3 parts on the topic of purity in a sexually impure world. This part is giving you a background on the world that we live in today. Is literally a world that is obsessed with sex. We are going to cover in part 1 also the changing views of sex. Parents, you have to be aware of this. Young people, you are probably aware, but you don't realize that this is a new view, all right? And then the appeal of sex. Why is sex so appealing? The Christian must understand that. And then God's design for sex. And when sex is sinful, we must be aware of that. Part 2, how to be pure. Understanding, having understood the situation that we live in, why it is sinful, and then how do we handle this? All right, no use telling you what is wrong, and then after that you don't know what to do from God's word. Many of you have submitted questions. That's very good. So there is a fair number. Then that is why we need to have a session 3 to answer questions. Along the way, you still can continue to submit questions. All right, but do so at least 4 days before the session. Now, why this topic? Why? Now the Bible says, shall we read, I'll just read to you because it's partial the verse. 2 Peter 2:14, God says, well, we live eventually in a time where people will be having eyes full of adultery and that cannot cease from sin. Cannot cease. In other words, everything that the people look at is about sex, full of adultery. Now please remember, this word adultery doesn't simply mean, well, you're a married person. Adultery simply refers to sexual uncleanness, all right? Outside God's boundary. It's called adultery. So it refers to even singles, people who are not married. People who will, well, whatever they see, whatever they think about, they look at a woman, they'll be thinking mainly about sexual thoughts. Likewise for women looking at men today. Cannot cease from this sin. Obsessive. Predominantly mastering their lives. This is the world we live in today when it comes to sex. Beguiling unstable souls. Now, that is where young people, parents, grandparents, you must be aware. God says, now there will be a time where people will get deceived, even into thinking this is fine. And God defines people like that as cursed children. Now this is a serious sin, the sin of sexual immoralities. Now for young people and young adults, to understand and live with purity, that is why we are covering this. We live in an increasingly sexual environment. In response to guidance, to live chastely, and don't be numbed by the world. We are living in a time where I think people don't even blink an eye when it comes to sexual immorality, filthiness of the flesh. Christians can also become numb. That is why we must cover this topic. Now then, for parents is for you to learn so that you can guide and counsel your children. And for married people, don't think this is, well, just for the teens, the young people. They're full of hormonal activities in them. This is for married people as well, not to fall into sexual sins. All right, so this is the reason. And let us look at some verses. Now, God gives us a duty to warn. That is why we, as a church, and you as parents, must warn, must teach. Proverbs 7:2, shall we read together? Keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye. Proverbs 7:5, then that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. Let's read the next, Proverbs 7:6-8. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement, and beheld among the simple ones, I discern among the youths, a young man void of understanding, passing through the street near her corner, and he went the way to her house. And you know the rest of the story, how he fell into fornication with this woman. Now God gives us commandments. He says, keep my commandments. And he gives us description how to keep us from this sin of sexual immorality. And the warning is to young people, right? Especially. So God tells us to warn. Now, if you look at these verses, it's interesting. Normally, parents, we warn our daughters, right? Be careful of the lustful man, all right? Be careful of these immoral men. But the Bible gives us warning to the men. Be careful of the dangerous woman. We often warn our daughters because we're afraid they get pregnant outside marriage, all right? They get cheated. But please don't think it is just a warning to the women. Fathers, parents, you must warn your sons as well. And there is this warning to women as well. For women, not to be sexually impure, not to be seducers. We live in an age where women openly talk about how lustful they are and how they want to hook a man using sex. Today, some women, they want someone, all right? How to make the person like her? Use allurement, use sex, use her body. Now, this is common today, even back then, all right? So, married couples, don't think that you'll be snared. You won't be snared. Proverbs has many warnings about the woman luring the married man when she is married herself, or luring a single man, and men falling into adultery with married women. All right, the Bible is full of such warnings. Now let us read. Hearken unto me, now therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways. Go not astray in her paths. For she hath cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. Now, there is the warning. Uncleanness, adultery. Now, God says many strong men have been slain by this immoral sin. Don't think that you are strong. Now today, many pornography actresses, all right? This is a good description of them as well. So this is not just physically you commit fornication with them, all right? Men also engage in pornography and, well, they follow after pornography stars. And God says, now many strong men, many even strong Christians have been slain by her. Her house is the way, continue reading. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. Now this sin is one of the sins where God talks about how it leads people into hell. Fornication, uncleanness of the flesh. Let's read Proverbs 7, 18 to 19. Let's read together. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves. For the good man is not at home. He is gone along a journey. Now here is the continuing story where the woman say, well, come. Now is it not true today that women also commit adultery with men when the husband is traveling? You read about those military men and their wives staying at home. This is common. All right? For the good man is not at home. She won't even say, my husband is not at home. She will say, the good man. Well, say husband, well, the young man may get turned off. Oh, yeah, husband. I didn't think of, she's married. But she said, the good man. All right? Like as if he is nothing to her as well. Just a good man, that's all. Nothing to me. He's not at home. And the men also look for such women. Look to seduce such women. Look to be part of such activities with women. Now this is, since the Old Testament, constantly warning the Christian. Now let me ask you, are you uncomfortable speaking of or hearing the topic of sex? How many of you kind of like, don't know whether to attend or not, so very uncomfortable to listen to such things, or worse, to tell my children, to talk to my children, to teach my children about these things? Are you uncomfortable? Now, parents, avoid. Too embarrassing. Or don't bother to teach. Churches often fail to warn their congregation in these days. A topic that's either avoided or ignored. Too embarrassing to talk about. Don't know what to talk about. Now, what happens? Such failures result in cohabitations. Many Christians, even after they become Christians, because parents never taught them, and the church do not deal with such topics, they do not realize cohabitation is wrong, is sinful. Premarital sex, they do not realize it's wrong. There are Christians who are involved in premarital sex, living together. Then you tell them, this is sin. What? Are you sure? We didn't know. Very common. Pregnancies before marriage as a result. Well, the body that God gives you fall into diseases, sexually transmitted diseases. Result, broken homes. Now, because of the failure to teach, the failure to deal with matters like that, there are many people who become Christians, they go through church, and then they, so-called fall in love with another young person, then they have premarital sex, and they don't even think it's wrong. In fact, the worst thing is parents, and this is one of the questions you submitted. Parents even say, why do pastors say it is wrong? Because if my daughter don't stay with the person, sleep with the person, well, how does she know whether they're compatible? And the man will say, well, if I don't sleep with her, then how do I know she will please me? These are Christians talking. So my friends, when church fail to deal with these things, fail to show how the world thinks, fail to show what God thinks about this matter, all these things happen. The name of God gets shamed. Well, parents and churches must not fail, all right? So that is the background, why we must deal with this. And parents, please pay attention. Young people, please take note. Now, what kind of world we live in? A sexually impure world. This is not new to you. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, well, he reflected on the experience after he and millions of viewers, well, they got the shock of their life because this man dressed up in a mankini. I never even knew what is a mankini, all right? Until I go and check up, it's gross, all right? It's a man wearing a very indecent so-called bikini. So like woman is bikini, man is mankini. He went on stage at a telethon, raised $25,000 just walking in that mankini from north to south, Cottesloe. And then even his son-in-law said, well, I'll pledge an extra $15,000 if he promised to wear the mankini on stage in front of the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister said, well, the courageous display of Mr. Bradley was something he can't unsee. Well, today, people, even when it comes to raising charity funds, it must be linked to this kind of indecency. That is the world we live in. But not only that, it's indecent, but yet people think it's fun, it's funny, it's nothing wrong. Not only that, they say, you do it, I'll give you some more money. Goading people on in this kind of indecency. And, well, the Labour leader rightly say, some things that you see, you can't unsee. That is why the Christian must be very careful. Well, I myself thought that the telethon pajamas that young Emily and young Ari encouraged me to wear as a top were enough. So all kind of very sexually immoral, indecent things are lauded today. That is the world we live in. A sexually impure world. Some more examples, just to give you a taste. Celebrity chef rips off his shirt on telethon TV for a donor. All right? Well, you want to see my body? Well, this in the previous days, these are things that people would say is shameful. They probably kick the person out. We all know this famous person, right? Tash? Well, actually, I don't know until when I I did some research and I realized this person has been going around. I've read about her, Tash. She goes around indecently baring her body, her nakedness as a stunt, right, to protest. Well, if you're protesting for something that you think is good, why must you be so indecent? That is the world we live in. Everything is about that. Subscription porn is acceptable means of making a living. You know about that, right? Many housewives, well, because they're stuck at home because of the COVID-19 and all that, they decide to have subscription channels, private channels. You pay and then you watch and I'll undress for you. And you read these things, you say, this is crazy. In the past, this would be such a shameful thing to do. Today, they openly publicize it and you read the husbands say, I am so proud of my wife. In such a short time, she made so much money. Well, this is a great profession. And the husband encouraged the wife to do that. That is the world, the sexually impure world that we live in. Now, my point is this. It's so normal that today is like making a living. That is all. And when the Christian think that way, also say, well, it's just a living, so what's wrong with me watching? We have also sports stars. Another article just, I think, yesterday, sports stars, teenagers, also having these subscription porn channels. Because they're sports stars, they look very fit, and lustful men want to see more, and they go on all this. Right? Provocative dressing and poses are the norm. You look at any photograph, wedding photograph, or teenagers hanging out, take photographs, they have to strike very seductive, sexually suggestive poses, baring part of their bodies, making certain facial expression, making certain noises. That is how it is today. We live in a sin-crazed and infested world. Body painting in lieu of clothing. Do you know that? That people go around naked, but they just paint themselves with some paint. And they go around. It's art. Well, sexed up costumes, dressing for Halloween. Even Halloween is, well, in the past it's like scary costume. Now this scary costume has to do with, well, very sexually provocative characters. Bodies, people exercise, well, to show off their bodies. Men, to get women to lust after them. I never forget, this lifeguard said that when he was doing lifeguard patrol on the beach, the women were all running after him and trying to pull off his swimming trunks. Now that is the world we live in, where men and women both alike behave like that. It is a sexually impure world. Well, sexually explicit speech, that is how it is. Movies, the more crude, the more sexually crude it is, the more ticket it sells. Music, a lot of the music that the world produced, the songs about adultery, fornication, blatant sex and all that. Media promotes all these things. Sensuality accepted as norm. Image processing technology, well, computer animations. Anime, for example. Computer games. They're typical, even if war games and all that, it must be half-naked women, half-naked men. That is how it is. Social media regularly posts suggested sites, right, with revealing photographs, online models, various stages of undress. Now, sex and sexuality is flaunted. It is not private anymore. It is for flaunting. Cohabitation is normal. Have you heard of this polyamorous? Recently, very frequent in the news as well, where people openly talk about, well, they have multiple partners, whether they're married or not married. Polyamorous means poly is many. Amorous means amorous relationship, love relationship. So they openly talk about how they date other people, then the partner date another person, and then they form a partner together, and they do all these kind of things together. That is touted today. Woman wanting the husband to be like that. Husband wanting the woman to be like that. Now, the level of indecency and immorality has dropped so low that it is no longer frowned at, but it is, if you're in such a thing, you flaunt it. You flaunt it. Now, this is a problem. Ease of access to all sorts of impurity, impure sights and sounds at the click of a button. Pornography. Even today, when you try and search for something, go to legitimate sites, whether it's news or sports or shopping for grocery, you have advertisements, photographs that are so inappropriate, right? Sexually inappropriate. Now, parents and children, you're not using textbooks much anymore. A lot of you are using computers. A lot of work is done through online work. Parents, you must realize that your children now suddenly is exposed to, they're just literally one click away from all this sexual immorality and impurity, just one click away. You can't stop it because you can't stop them using the computer because of their schoolwork. But you have to be very aware of this sexually immoral world that your child now lives in. You have to monitor very carefully. We'll talk about that more next week. Now, young ones as well, don't be curious. You must be very aware you live in a very, very dark and indecent world. You stay away from these things. When you see something pop up, all right, you immediately stay away from it. Call your daddy or mommy to help you filter those things out. Well, what else about ease of access? Indulge in your own bedroom whenever you want. You see, sexual immorality no longer needs you to go somewhere where you may be seen of others and be embarrassed. It no longer needs you to to be above a certain age with your identity to enter certain places, to see certain things. No longer like that. In the past, it was like that. But now, whatever age you are, young or elderly person, in the privacy of your own bedroom, you can click and go anywhere and visit anything and watch anything, however sexually immoral it is. The ease of access to a world that is so filthy. Satan wants that to be the case. Satan wants it to be so available to all of us because then temptation is readily at your doorstep, at your fingertips, in fact. Well, in privacy, no one will know. You can be very dignified, you can be very decent looking. But the point is this. Why am I talking about all this? We live in times where the sexual immorality is so great, so immense, so dark, and so prevalent. Christian, I have to ask you, are you involved in anything sexually immoral privately? Now then let us well, another thing I want to say before I move on is this. Now, because it is so common, number one, so prevalent, so acceptable, number two, people don't even blink an eye about it anymore. As a result, the Christian may even begin to think this is not so terrible a sin after all. Because it's everything, it's everywhere. There are far worse things. All right? So just a little uncleanness, a little lust is all right. It is not. My point up to this stage is this. Why do I want to give you so many examples? It is very, very common now. You have to be very sensitive to it. Or you fall into sexual immorality in your mind, which will lead to actions. Now I want to talk about some other aspects. Now in WA, the law is this. People can't have sex or engage in any sexual activity at all. Now if one is under the age of consent, or number two, if one of the party doesn't want to, or they are in the same family. 3 conditions, all right? In Western Australia, people under 16 years old cannot legally consent to having sex. So even they consent, but it is illegal. The age of consent is 18 years old if there is a special relationship between people, such as One is a position of power or authority over the other person, like a teacher with a student. All right? Then the age of consent is 18. Now, this is the world's view on sex. All right? The world's view. The world's view is not the Bible's view. It is beyond what Scriptures allows. I'm not saying we need to tell the government to change the law, all right? And the government is we should protest and all that. What I'm saying is, Christian, you must be aware, the world, look at the bottom, remember, laws affect society's values and practices. What the world says is fine doesn't mean for the Christian that it is sexually fine as well. That is the point. Because the world basically say sex can occur outside marriage. Remember this slide. There is nothing in the law to say that if you are not married, you cannot have sex. Sex can occur outside marriage. And if you want to have sex for the world, as long as both parties agrees, they are old enough by individuals' government standard, it is fine, even if it's outside marriage. That is the world's view. So your friends, young people in school, that is how they think. Parents, this is how the world would tell your children, this is okay. But they are unbelievers. But the parent must know it is not okay, which we'll see later on. Well, government laws of sex is any kind. What is sex? All right, so now we keep using the word sex. What is sex? Basically, government laws on sex in WA are regarding any kind of sexual activity. So when you say have sex, it means any kind of sexual activity. This includes kissing, all right, touching someone sexually, any kind of sexual penetration. So parents, do not have the wrong idea that when your children talk about sex, or when their friends talk about sex, it is simply about, well, there is sexual intercourse, penetration. No. Anything that includes this kind of bodily rubbing, touching, especially sexual areas, this is sex. So you must know that is what it means. Now, with so much sex around us, we don't think that sexual thoughts and casual sex is that bad. Because the world have sex casually. They watch pornography. They talk about dirty things. To the point where the Christian may feel it is not that bad. It is not so bad a sin. Well, as long as there's consent, it's fine. As long as it doesn't create problems in the long run, don't get pregnant, it's fine. Now, we indulge in some of it without too much feeling of guilt. Is that what is happening to you? Take ourselves back 20 years, or maybe even 10 years. Now, many of these images that we see, we will, as Christians, will say, I should not even look at that. But today it's so common. We watch sports programs that are like that, and maybe you even want to watch certain sports programs that are like that. You say, well, it's like that. The world is like that. We have adopted some of the world standards, but still stay morally above them. All right? Many areas we are moral, but in this particular area, and that is the point of these sessions, we can be, well, very conservative in theology, in doctrines, and even in many other areas, drinking, smoking, gambling. But now this area is so pervasive and so low in standard today that the Christian may even be indulging in them and think it's okay. Now, I've actually counseled Christian men before who have been Christians for some time, and also new Christians. And when I talk to them, well, they say, when I deal with this particular thing about pornography and all that, some of them look very shocked. Oh, you mean it's wrong? I didn't know. Because we cover it in BBK. They say, oh, I didn't know, it's wrong. Is it a small sin? Now, I want you to know, let's read together. Flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body. But he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own. Now, please know this is a unique sin. It is not like other sins. And God describes it. So, Christian, do not indulge in this uncleanness in any form, or just take it lightly and look at certain things. Do not take it lightly, because God says this is a sin. Now, listen carefully how God says it. Every sin that a man sinneth, that doeth, is without the body. Means it's outside the body. All right? And God says every sin. But this is one unique one. But he that committeth fornication, whether in thoughts, whether in physical acts, God says this is one thing that you sin against your own body. So it is a special kind of sin that does something to your body. Why does God say that? Because he says, what? Your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost. Christian, let us awake to that. Allowing these kind of things to enter us and think it is nothing. You may as well talk about, well, you go to the temple of God in the Old Testament and bring all sorts of filthiness into it and say, there, this is nothing. It's the same thing. God says, you are the body of the temple of the Holy Ghost. He dwells in you. And you allow these kind of things to defile the abode of the Holy Ghost. So, my friends, be very careful. Awaken to this. That is the background. Now we want to talk about the changing view of sin, all right? The changing view of sin. And you must be aware of the changing view. Now, teenagers are now, I'm quoting from, all right? I'm quoting from ABC News. They did some research. Does Australia, and the topic was, does Australia's sex education curriculum need to include more on sex positivity? LGBT plus and so on, LGBTQ plus and so on, all right? So the topic of research is this. Should Australia's education system, curriculum, include more on sex positivity? Now, what are they talking about? What are they trying to research? Now, these are quotes directly from that. Teenagers, so they say teenagers are generally having sex for pleasure. So they say this is the reality. But many schools treat sex as primarily reproductive activity. See, there is a bit of a problem with our society now. When the curriculum teaches about sex, it's mainly about, well, reproduction. The pleasure aspect is quite a large reason for young people having sex. You see, that's the reality. They have sex because it's pleasurable. Then it said, therefore, a more sex-positive mindset was needed to move away from the outdated, now they called it outdated concepts around sex. So, it's outdated to think about sex and to deal with it and to warn people about, well, you can get pregnant and all that, and tell you about, well, how to get pregnant and all that. It's outdated. Now you must talk about pleasure. Pleasure. Because teenagers have it for pleasure. So you must talk about pleasure. That is a positive mindset. If not, you're outdated. Now, furthermore, he says, we want to teach young people to really, we want to teach young people to have really positive, enjoyable sexual relationships. Now, this is the world saying that the education curriculum, some schools do focus on this, but by and large, all should focus on how to teach young people. And that means your children and even teenagers, very young teenagers, how to have, not how to avoid, but how to have, not just possible, but really positive, enjoyable. So enjoyable sexual relationship. Just let them have sex and let us teach you how to make this enjoyable for yourself. There's more, and they even say this, there's more work to be done around things like consent and negotiation in sexual relationship. They say more work needs to be done. This is the changing view, my friends. During our time when there is sex education, is to warn you about sexually transmitted diseases, is to warn you about getting pregnant outside marriage, is to warn you about all these kind of things. But now it's the opposite. It's to teach you how to have it better. This is the changing view. Parents, you must understand that. And young people, why am I reading this? The point is this. You are being taught. You are being told. You are being educated to enjoy sexual relationships at your age, even outside marriage. You must know that this is what the world. Now, of course, we know the energizing force behind is Satan. All right? The world is the prince of this world, Satan. He's the energizing force. Parents, please know your children are exposed to this kind of philosophies. What is sex? Well, I quote from health.wa.gov. What is sex? Sex can mean different things to different people. When most people talk about having sex, they usually are referring to sexual intercourse or penetrative sex. But they make it clear, all right? It is also possible to be sexual without actually having sex. Things like kissing, touching, rubbing, stroking are all that can make you feel good. And this is the amazing part. The government website says this. Knowing about all the options you have can help you make informed choices that are best for you. Now the reality is this. To them, all these kind of intimate activities, there are many to choose from. They openly tell you, know all of them, whether you're adult or teenager. Well, what is best for you? What is suited for you to choose. Now that is how the world talks today. So, sex refers to all activities that can sexually arouse you. Now, this is taken from Women Health, all right, womenshealth.org.au. Now, sex is any act that can sexually arouse you. Sex is more than sexual intercourse. And they openly say you can also have sex with yourself. You know what they're talking about, right? So all these activities, this is what the sex is. Means, by definition, the Christian must understand, you see something, you look at something, sexually arouses you, they say basically by definition, that is a sexual activity. In your own room, touching your own body. They say, well, you can do that as well, that is sex. Now let's look at the survey. This is taken from the National Report, all right, education.au, as well as from the same research in ABC News. Now, in this survey, year 10 to 12 students engaging in deep kissing, 74%. So it's very common. The other day, someone was saying, I can't remember, was it year 12 or was it university? This person was saying, yeah, first time I exposure to it, I walked past and then these students just sitting there and just kissing very deeply or something like that. Very common. They just do it in school, in public, or maybe some corner. That's all. Sexual touching, year 10 to 12. Sexual touching. 65% say, well, we've done it. Sexual touching means touching certain parts of the body that are private. Sexual intercourse, 44%, almost half of year 10 to year 12 students interviewed. This is how common it is. This is what your children's friends, hopefully not your children, because they've been taught, your children's friends are doing in school. So you just walk to your school, your child's school, you say 74% likely have been engaged in very sexual kissing. 65%, they touch each other's body, private parts. Sexual intercourse, well, 1 out of almost 2 have already done it in year 10 to 12. That is the Australian survey among school students. Do you think this topic is important? Many Christians have fallen because of the failure of parents of church identifying teaching on this topic. They don't even realize this is sex, this is sinful. Right? To them, it's just kissing. No, by definition, this is a sexual activity. Now, you have to realize this. It doesn't reach sexual intercourse overnight. It begins with the other sexual activities first. That is where it leads to. That's why the Christian must realize, I must avoid these things. Number one, they are sexual activities. Number two, it's going to lead to worse things. Whether you're a student, whether you are a single, whether you are a married person. The education system's focus is how to have safe sex. All right? How to have safe sex. How to ensure consensual sex. All right? We have to teach you. All right? It must be consensual. You must say yes or say no. So their focus is that. Of course, because they are not Christians. All right? They don't have a moral system according to the Bible. So to them, they think that this is what is protection. So my point is this. I'm not here to criticize the government. I'm here to let you know the world thinks that this is how to protect your child. And they're doing their part. And to them, protecting your child is teach them how to have safe sex. So their point is, anyway, they are having sex. What's the point of teaching them no? And this is the important part. What's the point of telling them no? They are going to do it anyway. So let's teach them how to do it safely. That is the system. That's the thinking. It's almost like, when you think about this, does it make sense? They are robbing, stealing, cheating anyway. Whatever you do, they are going to cheat in exams. You know that when in the shopping center, they shoplift. They are going to do it. They are going to take drugs. You know how it is in society. Well, actually, they do teach them how to take drugs safely. Let us teach them how to cheat. Let us teach them how to steal. Let us teach them how to do these things better, safer, in a safer way. All right, so now what are birth control measures to prevent diseases and pregnancies? So that is their aim. Their aim is not to tell them, don't do this. Their aim is how to do it safely and how to prevent pregnancies. They're inconvenient. You're too young to have a baby. But, we encourage you and we will teach you how to have a happy sexual relationship with your classmate. But, we don't want you to come to school pregnant. So we teach you how to prevent that. So this is the world. This is the changing view of the world. They have the world's purpose in mind. Don't get pregnant or fall sick with disease. Not about abstaining before marriage or avoiding adultery. Okay? Now let us look at this. The changing view of sex. Sex popularity is pleasure. So you must know how the world responds to sex. Now in the survey of school population, this is what the sexual education in Australia 2011 data showed. Look at the chart. What do you deduce? Women, the dark line, men, the light line. Now, what is the lowest? Love. Love is the lowest. What are the higher ones? The highest. Feelings of pleasure, happy, good, fantastic. These are the highest feelings after a sexual encounter. So to the world, sex is pleasurable. All right? Well, is it not pleasurable? We see afterwards, okay? So now, the world's view of sex outside marriage is desirable. In fact, it's all right. It's all right to watch pornography, don't harm anybody. It's okay for me to look at my colleague, my friend, and have lustful thoughts, mentally undressing them. That is what the world says. Sex is sexiness. Sex and sexiness is fun. Dress sexily, all right? It's just all good fun. Indecency is just good fun. Acceptable and even up to date. If you are modest, you are square and you are not out to date. You have to be sexy, all right? We always hear our people when they choose wedding gowns, when they choose modest wedding gowns, the shops, by and large, will tell them, this is so old-fashioned. This is so modest. There's no appeal. What's wrong with you? Why do you want to wear these kind of things? Because sexy is now up to date. Sex is accepted as long as your legal age is consensual. We said that. Now, sex has little to do with marriage. That is the view of the world today. In the past, well, in many of your minds as parents, sex outside marriage is absolutely shameful and unacceptable. But you must get into the mind of your teenager now. Get into the mind of the young people now. It is not unacceptable. In fact, it has nothing to do with marriage. Now, I want to quote this. This I took from Urban Dictionary because, there's a very famous phrase now because of a movie, I think, friends with privileges. Do you know what people mean when friends with privileges? So, this is how Urban Dictionary define this phrase. Well, first person asks, dude, do you really like the nail? Right? Dude. And then the second person, are you crazy? We are just friends with privileges. This is how they give an example of how to use this phrase. Now, do you really like Danielle? Means they are sleeping together. They are having sex together. They are cohabiting together. Everybody knows it. So the friend asks, hey, you really like Danielle? And the person say, what are you talking about? Are you insane? What has liking Danielle, don't know even about love or married to, what has liking Danielle to do with us having sex at all? We are just friends with privileges. Now, the meaning of friends with privileges. In friends with benefit scenarios, we are just friends who hang out and sometimes have sex, be intimate with each other. People who are friends with benefits may be free to date other people. The physical stuff they do is usually no strings attached. They are not necessarily committed to each other. All right? Friends with privilege. And another quotation they use to describe is, well, a friend telling another friend. So they give you all this example of how to use this phrase. Carol gave me friend privilege. So the friend said, Carol gave me friend privilege. I'm going to have some great times with her from now on. The changing view of sex in this world. In the past, is shameful. Now it is like a recreation. Do you understand that? It's like two persons, well, we can't get along. We like chao kway teow. Let's go and have chao kway teow together. Oh, you really like so-and-so, eat with her? What is it to do with like her? We are friends who like to eat chao kway teow, that's all. We are friends who like to eat pasta, that's all. Pizza, that's all. And we go eat it together, that's all. Both men and women think like that. So, this is the world today. Now, young person, I address you first. You have to know the world thinks like that. Are you also thinking like that now? Actually, what's the big deal? Why must church hold a few sessions on this? It's just sex. It's just like two of us go play a game of badminton. We both like it. That's all. What is the big deal? Have you degenerated to that point? Have you? If you have, you must realize God says it's fornication. And it's a very unique sin, not like any other kind of sin. It is not no big deal. So the Christian must awaken. Parents, you must be aware. And don't ask things like, well, if they don't sleep together, how do we know that they get along well? They're good for each other. It's called fornication, right? So friends with privileges, that is what it is. And this is common in school today, all right? I was talking to some of the university students, and that is what they talk about as well. Today it's just that. They live in the same dorm, they sleep together, they have sex. Everybody knows it. No one blinks an eye because, what about it? What's the big deal? In fact, if you're not in such a relationship, maybe there's something wrong with you. Those views of sex outside marriage, sex is just another way to feel good. Enjoy yourself, just a recreational activity. Can be with anyone. No link, no commitment, no strings attached. Little to no relation to reproduction, to form a family. So sex has nothing to do with procreation. In fact, procreation is an undesirable side effect. That is the thinking and the changing view of sex today. In the past, people see it as a very honorable thing in marriage, and it's for forming a family, and so there's nothing to do with that today. It's a troublesome thing about sex today is you can get pregnant. We must teach God's view. The world has strong views that are introduced to you as an adult. So what if I like my colleague, we are on a holiday, then we just, do something, have a romp together? What's the big deal? Now, when I was working, there was this situation. A married woman. all right, married woman. We were on a company trip, all right, and they openly hug and kiss. He openly hug and kiss a single man, all right. And although they have their separate rooms, they slept in the same room, all right. And then when we have to knock on the door and ask them to go, come, you're late for activities. They both were in towels, answering the door. There is absolutely no shame in that. In fact, they think we are actually quite a cool couple now. No shame at all. That is the view that the world has. In fact, one of them claimed to be a Christian. Amazing. Parents, adults and children need to understand understand this whole topic on sex from a Christian viewpoint. Don't be changed by the world. Parents and church need to learn and need to teach the right view in the light of God's word and His purpose. It is not just about morality. It is not just about avoiding consequences. It is about 1 Corinthians 6:18-19. We are teaching this not because, please, don't have any pregnancy case outside marriage in our church. Please, don't have all this kind of sexual disease. Please, that is not the point. The point God says is it is a unique sin and you defile the temple of the living God. You must awake to that. Now, appeal of sex. Quickly. The appeal of sex. I'm 15 minutes behind. Now, then we have to talk about the appeal of sex. Just now I said, well, to the world, sex is just for pleasure. All right? And they say, well, sex is pleasurable. That's why we do it. It's just like you like to eat a certain food is pleasurable, so you just do it. Recreational, casual, that's all. Okay, so I really hope that it has sunk into you by now. You look at your colleagues, you look at your friends in school, to their mindset it is just another thing they do for recreation, that is all. Why are you so prudish? Why are you so hung up about this? But you see, the reality is, as they survey and say, yeah, people have sex outside marriage, and then they find, well, happy, pleasurable, and all that. Now let us look at this. And teens, young people, parents, you must understand something is happening to your body as you are in puberty. Now, puberty. What is puberty? It's a period of rapid growth, at the end of which the body reaches reproductive maturity. All right? So you're going through puberty. Parents, if you know your child is going through puberty, you must know something is happening in the child. Physical changes occur. Sex organs begin to develop, female and male sexual organs. Now, they begin to release certain hormones, sex hormones, into your body. Emotional changes occur. So both physical and emotional changes occur. And the emotional changes, you begin to have certain desires. When you're young, do you like boys? They are the worst thing on earth. Do you like girls? Girls are horrible. Puberty, certain desires begin to change. Certain things will happen. This is biological. All right? Sexual changes in you are biological. You must be aware of that. Hormonal changes together with other factors now create sexual desires, and they begin to start. Okay? So those of you who are going through puberty or haven't reached or is in it, or parents who know about that, no, these things are happening. Why is it important to realize this? Now, in fact, these are the changes that in your body brings pleasure, sexual pleasure. All right? It is there. It is there. Now, next. The reason why you must be aware is for control. Teens and parents must be aware that these are biological changes that are occurring, so you must be prepared to resist the impulses that come. These impulses will come. And parents, you must watch. You must guide. You must be aware that they can fall into these impulses. They may not be aware of it. The reason why I'm talking openly about it is you will have those sensations when you are with a boy, girls, all right? Or girls, when you are with a girl. You must be aware those sensations are not to be those, and if certain sexual desires come up, you must realize that is part of the change and you must resist. You must Not say, I'm just go ahead and touch her. I'm just going to go ahead and sleep with her. Now maybe you say, Pastor, you're overreacting. I've helped serve in several churches, all right? Even the most decent-looking boy, even the most active person that I know, one of the most active, all right? In year 12, right? Year 12. Active, serving, godly, come for prayer meeting, everything. Now, one day told me, I had sex with my classmate. What should I do? And the person just asked like, it's nothing. I was puzzled. I was very puzzled because I say, this kind of conversation is very different if it was 10 years ago. It will be a discussion of remorse, shame, but it was very, very normal. It's like, I play badminton with my friend. It's that kind of statement. That's all. I could not understand until I prepared this Bible study. Then I began to understand, parents, you must know your children have reached a stage and been changed by the world that they really do not think it is so severe and bad a thing. And all the person was asking, so what to do? How to repent? And it's like, so that I can move on, and that's it. With a classmate, I say, is your girlfriend? It was this a bit puzzled look. It's like, why must it be my girlfriend? I never understood that conversation until this week. The person said like, girlfriend? No. Why girlfriend? So how is it possible? It's just my classmate. We just do it. One afternoon we decide to do it. So parents, you must know there are changes, even for the younger ones especially. Don't leave them alone at home with another boy, another girl. Don't let them go for all these kind of parties, sleepovers. We'll talk about all this next week, all right? But what I'm telling you is be aware. Young person, be aware. Do not get yourself into a situation where these impulses that are present in your body gets the better of you because you allow it to and you put yourself in that position. Now, next. These biological developments result in sensations of pleasure. They're meant for marriage. They are meant for marriage, not outside marriage. So these impulses, these sensations, they in themselves are not sinful. But these developments are meant for marriage. Okay? Understand that well. That is the view of God, and not the view that we should not have the view of the world. Now, the facts behind why sex feels good. Why? Now, this is a clinician, or I don't know what you call them, sex clinical studies person. Now, she defined this. Lust, feeling of sexual desire and wanting to jump into bed with someone. Now, this stage is characterized by hormones, testosterone, and estrogens, all right? It's caused by these changes in men and women, these hormones. Biologically, they acknowledge that, and we know that. Now, attraction, beginnings of relationship where it makes us feel like we are drunk with love, infatuation. Well, teens, are you going through that? Before that, you see boys, you can't stand them. Now you see certain boy, your heart flutters, right? You feel dizzy. Now, these are things that happen. Yes, they do happen. Infatuation, constantly. Now, you let those things occur and then you satisfy them. Now, they describe this as dopamine, all right? Dopamine, I need to find out how to pronounce this, dopamine or dopamine, is released into the brain when we do these things that feel good to us. Whether you look at an image and then those chemicals are released into your brain, that is why you have sensations. So why are there sensations? Why are there pleasure? It is true, there are. And that's why you must be careful. Why are there? Because these are chemicals released in your brain. One of these things is having sex, whether it is sexual, having sex with yourself, that's how they describe it, or whether it is having sex with someone. Both dopamine and whatever, look at that word. I should have found out how to pronounce it. Now, can make us feel sort of high, and make us feel euphoric, energetic. Those surveys, definitely, they are accurate because that is what you feel. Now, why am I talking about this? You will experience this, and if you satisfy them by yourself or with someone, these chemicals are released, you feel good. These are all reserved for marriage, understand that. But my point is this: your body will crave those sensations more and more and more. If you always, indulge in something, whatever it is that is sexual, before you sleep. Well, some people, they watch pornography to sleep. Why? Because studies show until you experience that chemical release in you, you cannot sleep. Until you experience the chemical release in you, you cannot be comfortable. And the next time you have it, you need more and more and more. That is how it works. Now, why all this needs to be mentioned? Because, let's read together. 1 Corinthians 7:9. But if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. You see, God acknowledges that the sexual emotions and desires, they can be burning, means very strong. And it can be an uncontrollable lust. And therefore, better for them to get married. These are emotions that can be satisfied in marriage without sin. It is not sin in marriage. So young person, this feeling of high, now this lust, they can become an addiction and you can't stop because it feels good. It feels good. Premarital sex will feel good, just like it will feel good in marriage. Why? Because it is sex. That is what the body responds. That's how the body responds. Now all this is to warn you, please don't get curious. It's just like taking drugs. Don't get curious about drugs. You know that. This is the same effect. Next. All right? Now back to this reminder. God knows that we live in a sexually impure world. And God describes, even in their time, the New Testament believers, all right, just not too long ago, 2,000 years or less, there are people, eyes are full of adultery. Now the setting is like, for example, it's a religious festival. And these people go to the religious festival. God describes that even at this religious festival, and many of them are very carnal kind, there will be men all over, just looking at the woman, lusting after them, one after another. Now, does that not describe today's rock concerts? Does that not describe today just shopping centers? Now, if you are like that, you have fallen into this problem of succumbing to a sexually impure world. God says, yeah, the people just keep looking and lusting, that's all. And all they do is from one place to another, just lusting. When I was very young, a friend, I went to stay over at a friend's place, and the two older brothers, right? At 5 p.m., well, they have to look after me. Then they brought me downstairs to the bus stop, and they said, don't tell people we brought you here. I said, why? So what are we doing here? These two older brothers, they just went to the bus stop just to look at women going back from work. They just went down to look at that. Then I was like, when I read this verse, whenever I read this verse, it makes me think of that. They just go down to look at women. Say, we're coming here to look at women. And that's it. Because they go home at that time. A world that is so unclean that it will cause even believers to become like that. You may not be open like them, but are you like that when you're walking around? Even for women. Now, very quickly. Defiled mind constantly seek lust. So parents, you must watch. Please watch what your children are into. Please watch how they dress. Please watch the kind of friends they have. We have to move on, all right? Let me see. Oh, here I must say this. Now, please don't just think of your child. Please just don't think of the teenagers in church. Married people cannot assume that you will be spared. It can happen. It can happen to you and may be happening to you as well. Quickly, second last area, all right? Second last area. caught up with time. God's design for sex. Now we say the world's view, the world's situation. Now, but what does the Bible talk about sex? So, young person, you must understand. Married person, you must understand. Single, you must understand. What is God's design for sex? Now, men and women are created physically different. Genesis 1:27, let's read together. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Right? So God is very clear in his records. Male and female. Different genders. Now, and they were created, let's read Genesis 1:28. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it. So, this, in order to multiply, in order to be fruitful, procreate, they must enter into a sexual relationship as husband and wives. So, God intended that men and women have sexual relationship as husband and wives. Okay? So, it's a design. So don't think sex is a dirty word. Don't talk about sex. Sex is always dirty and bad. No, it is created, intended by God to be used in marriage. Okay, so know that. Now, next thing. Now, so that is why there is this sexual puberty, the development, reproductive organs, all part of God's design. All right, so don't think, hey, why are you having those feelings? All right, this sinful. You can't say that. It's what God created in human beings. But to let those senses, emotions, be uncontrolled and enter into lust, then that is very sinful. Now, next one. God's good design for sex in marriage. Sex is meant as part of a design of God, and it's a good thing. Okay? Now, Hebrews 13:4, let's read together. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. So, God makes it clear. When it comes to the bed, all right, bed is one way to say sexual relationships. The bed in marriage is honorable. So, don't think sex is dirty. In marriage, in outside marriage, it is. It's fornication, it's adultery. In marriage, it is honorable. All right, so we cannot become Christians and say, oh, sex is... and you get married, you don't even want to have sex because sex is bad. Now, next one. Let's read. Sex gives pleasure. Proverbs 5:18-19. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as the loving hind and pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished with her, always with her love. You see, God does talk about sexual relationship as pleasurable in the marriage. And it's meant only for between husband and wife, all right? And even the private parts of the body in marriage, it is honorable. God says, be ravished, all right? Let her breast satisfy thee, not another woman's breast, all right? Now, sex is very good within God's plan of marriage. Let's read Genesis 1:31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So God created all things, and it was very good. After he created man, very good. Knowing that it's male and female. Knowing that there will be sex in marriage. Sex in marriage was part of the plan and was very good. Well, I would say this. Anything that is good, that God creates, Satan wants to turn it into evil. All right? Want to turn it into something that men will abuse. Sex is definitely one of them. Now, next. Sex and sexual desires are not merely for hedonistic enjoyment. All right? It's not just for pure carnal enjoyment. Humans are not to use sex based only on fleshly impulses and indiscriminately like animals. All right? For men that God created, sex in marriage is honorable. Not do it whenever you want with whoever you want outside marriage. Not to be regarded just as another biological instinct to be satisfied like hunger and thirst. And that is exactly how the world views sex today. It's like, I feel like it, I'd go do it. Right? I'm bored, I call someone over. Literally, they do that. Students. Adults as well. God says sex is not designed to be used like that. It's within marriage. And God says, meat for the belly and belly for the meat, but God shall destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for fornication, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. So know one thing, Christian. Now if you begin to think, well, what's so bad about I do something in private, I look at something, I have sex with myself, I don't harm anyone. Now God says the body is not for fornication. Any sexual activities outside marriage is called fornication. Or even the married person. Okay? Just some hugging and touching is not sex, right? With my colleague. We're very close friends. I like her. Well, we won't get into a sexual relationship. But God says that is fornication. And the body of the believer is not to be used for that. Okay? Now, sexual relationship, God designed sexual relationship. And it is to make you one flesh. Okay? So you must know this. Sexual relationship is to make you one. That is why it's for marriage. Let's read together. Know ye not that your bodies are the members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of an harlot? God forbid. What? Know ye not that he which is joined to an harlot is one body? For two saith he, shall be one flesh. But he that is joined unto the Lord is one spirit. So God says, now don't you know that once you enter into a sexual relationship with someone, you have become one with the person. Something happens that God defines as you are one. That's why it's only for marriage. And how can you... Now, I hope no Christian ever do this, but Christians do that as well. They visit prostitutes, very often exposed in newspapers, all right? Pastors, elders, that kind of situation. Know that this is a unique sin, my friend. Don't think also that, well, I'm just watching pornography, nothing. God says, well, as long as you have lust, you have committed adultery with her already. This is terrible, all right? So husbands, wives, you must never engage in those things and think that I'm not in physical relationship with someone else, so it's fine. But God says it's fornication. So summarize very simply, all right? The bed, you notice there's a baby pram, right? There's a baby cot, all right? It's for reproduction. In marriage, the bed is not dishonorable. It's part of physical union within one. Helps us to fulfill God's plan of procreation for those that God intend for you to get married. Sex is for that. Pleasure in sex helps promote physical union and procreation. Our bodies are God's. We must use it for God's purposes. But the world's practice, as long as consensual, is fine. Don't have to be in marriage. Right age is fine. Procreation, troublesome, undesirable effect of sex. But God says it's for procreation. Sex is simply for me to enjoy. But God says, no, it forms union. It is not just for you to enjoy and that's it. Like nothing happened after that. Now, finally, all right? Lastly, okay, now, sex is good and not sinful, only when it is for what God intends it for and how He wants us to use it. In other words, in marriage alone. Sin is transgression of God's law. Sex is sinful when it is used outside of marriage. All right? Whether it is just in your mind or whether you actually commit the act. Now, last section. When is sex sinful? When is sex sinful? Remember, I began this session by saying this. When parents fail to teach, when the church fails to teach this topic, these things, singles fall into fornication, married people fall into adultery, teens fall into fornication, unwanted pregnancies occur, diseases occur. These occur in churches. That is why this topic must be covered. This topic must be understood. This topic must be openly talked about because these things happen in church as well. All right? And I hope that they do not occur in BPCWA until our Christ returns. When is sex sinful? Now, I just want to recap the world's view on sex. You need to let this sink in. Sex can occur outside marriage. You must be so clear in your mind that is the world's view. We have read so many verses. Sex is designed and meant for to be used in marriage only. All right? But the world says sex can occur outside. That begins to linger in your mind. Sex is okay as long as both parties agree and are old enough by individual government standard. I want you to remember that again, because that can also linger in your mind. Well, the other party agrees, right? It won't be considered rape, so I can have sex with my classmate. Well, the other party agrees, right? So it is not sinful. I can have an adulterous relationship with another person. As long as my wife or my husband don't know, my children don't know, that's fine. See, because of this view, it lingers in your mind and you don't think it is so terrible after all, you actually do it. Consensual sex outside of marriage is evil. Now, I want you to read this together with me. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, and a man find her in a city, and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones, that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in a city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. Now, when it is sex outside marriage, God gave the law to the children of Israel. What are they to do? Woman, virgin, but betrothed, all right? Married to someone else. If they are found to have sex, means now she's and he committing adultery, you will stone them that they die. Why? Because God said you need to put evil among you, evil away from among you. Adultery in God's eyes is evil to the point where it deserves stoning to death. Right? So understand that. Today is dealt differently in the New Testament, but it is the same evil to the Lord. Defrocking of the pastor will be defrocked. The elder will be defrocked. All right? The people that are serving in the ministry will be removed from post. Will be disciplined. Now the point is this. As long as you are married, working person, I want to address that now. Don't take lustful thoughts against or at a colleague. Don't take, just a little bit touching here and there, or secretly kissing. As we don't have sex, so it is not adultery. My wife, it's not adultery against my wife. It's okay. Now, even the world defines those as sexual activities. And as far as God is concerned, it's a very evil thing. Don't think that you cannot fall into that. Now, I will continue first. The world's idea of sex is against God's word. Please take it very, very seriously. This is not a small sin. This is not just another, a little white lie sin. This is a unique kind of sin. This is a kind of sin that God says is worthy of death. Whether you're single or married, beware of falling into sexual sins in school. Now, why do we cover this? Teens, I hope that you know this seriously now. How the world thinks is not how God thinks. Their standards are so low, it is not your standard. Teens, I hope that you, with all this talk, you realize God says any kind of sexual touching, any kind of sex is only for marriage. So teens, you must realize that the world thinks it is just as like going out and having a pizza together. You cannot think like that. If any boy or girl tempts you, lures you, you must know that this is absolutely something that is not acceptable in my life at all. because I've seen the Bible verses. God says those that commit sexual acts outside marriage, in God's eyes, they are worthy of death. Even though my friends find it pleasurable, even my friends do it like every other day with every other person and is friends with privileges. Young men, you're in the university. Don't have this temptation that, well, everyone's doing it, right? Friends with privileges. Actually, it's so accessible. Well, initially, pornography is easily accessible. Now, the world have reached a stage where you want sex is also easily accessible. The other girl, if you can convince her to give you privileges, is accessible. Don't you ever think like that. God says any sex outside marriage. Maybe I'll read this now. Let's read together. And the man that committed adultery with another man's wife, even he that committed adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adultery and the adulteress shall be surely be put to death. This is how hateful it is. So, adult men, married men, don't think that, well, my colleague, my friend, she is willing. Well, other people, well, I like her. Other people is already sleeping with her. What's the problem, right? If you ever think friends with privileges, I might as well take advantage of it, since everyone is taking advantage of it, and it's accessible. Now, if you ever think of that, remember what God says about this sin. It is unique. You commit a certain sin in your body that stays. It is unique. You defile the temple of the Holy Ghost. And it's a sin that's worthy of death. So don't say it is there accessible, so I might as well have it. It is not like reaching out for a cup of drink when you're thirsty and just satisfy your thirst. Husbands, wives, the same at work. Anyone that commit adultery, the adulterer and adulteress shall surely. So God says, shall surely. This is one sin that there is no negotiation. They will surely be put to death. Don't take these thoughts lightly. Now, even in church, adulteries happen in church. Adulteries happen in church camps. Adultery happens in the church, between pastors and congregation members, between congregation members and congregation members. Don't even think that just because, well, the wife and my wife are very close, it's fine. Or the husbands are very close. Well, they talk to each other. Now, you need to be very suspicious. Women, any church member of the opposite gender that is suddenly very nice to you, you're very getting intimate with you, but should be all right, right? My husband and they talk so much. Or even the other way around. Husband, don't think these things don't happen in church. It happens in church. Where the woman begins to, women, be careful, begin to have amorous thoughts of a man in church. Can be someone's husband. It happens. It happens. All right? Of someone's husband. And very nice to the husband. But then as a wife, you say, but she's very nice to me as well, right? So these good friends are nothing. Please don't be so foolish. Be very, very careful. And women, if you begin to have such thoughts about someone else, another person's husband, another man in church, control it. Don't let it, or rather I would say, kill it. Don't let it proceed. Men the same, likewise, especially. So these things happen. Teenagers in church commit adultery. Adults between married couples commit adultery. They happen. That is why we need to cover these things. All right? So I've mentioned, this means that sex with anyone outside marriage is hateful. Don't think you may as well watch the porn. I may as well. Everyone's watching. I may as well have sex with the person since everybody's doing it. I may as well. These lusts that you fight are within you. The biological changes happen. All right? So, young person, you know it is there. Don't put yourself in those situations. I say that again and again. Don't go to those websites out of curiosity. It is not very different from just trying drugs. You say, I will never try drugs. It's the same kind of effect on you. Same for the adult men and women. Right now, so we see more of this. Flee fornication. Flee fornication. I want to remind us again and again. Every sin that a man doeth is outside the body. But he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. I want you to remember, what is sex? By the definition of the world even. Don't talk about Christians. Christians should have much higher standard. Sex means different things to different people. It's possible to be sexual without penetrative sex. All right? Touching, rubbing, stroking, all this, kissing, these are sexual activities. Don't do that in school and think it's nothing. This is, by definition, the world. Survey. This is what is sex. Remember, this is sex. And it leads to worse things. Now, finally, men, women, in church, at work, students in school. The allurement of sex, being in this world which we've shown is so sex-obsessed, so sex-infested, or forbidden sex kind of infested. Now, remember when the serpent tempted Eve, he said to Eve, Yea hath God said. Did God say it is so terrible a sin? You've read it for yourself. Multiple verses. Yes, God said it. But he will always make you think, the whole world thinks like that. The whole world lives like that. The whole world does that. Friends with privileges and so on. And pornography and subscription pornography, the whole world does it even for a living. What is wrong? It is so. Is it so bad? That's how he will talk to you. Next, the serpent will say, you shall not surely die. Don't worry. It's just a small sin. You will not surely die. You will end up in consequences that you will regret for life. You will succumb to the temptation. Finally, she say, because she entertained, it is good for food, pleasant to the eyes. Tree to be desired to make one wise. She took. 8. Give it to her husband. You will fall. This sin of sex is a very dangerous sin that Satan is very good at deceiving you. So when you're in church, when you're at work, when you're in school, remember what happened in the Garden of Eden when certain emotions for someone arises that you know you should not have. Next. Forbidden fruit can taste sweet. That is a problem with sin. The Bible says stolen waters are sweet and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But remember, James 1:15-16, let's read together. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin when it is finished bringeth forth death. Do not err, my beloved brethren. God loves you. God said, don't make this mistake, my beloved ones. You think that lust is nothing, just you in a room on your own, or with someone in secret. And it's consensual, although it's outside marriage. But lust, when you let it proceed to the next stage, it will bring forth death. All kinds of death. Death to your family. Death to your own spiritual life. Death to many things. Sexual lusts are strong. Please know that. Last slide. Please be aware of that. Why we cover this is to let you know sexual lusts are, or rather sexual emotions are biologically present in us. And they can be very strong. God even used the word burn. You need to be aware of how the world thinks, and you have very high standards, and stay away and be very clear what God's standards are. Now let's read 1 Corinthians 7:2. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every man have her own husband. Now God says, 7:5 reading, defraud ye not one the other, except ye be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, and Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. What is God saying? Even for husband and wife, you are not to withhold sexual relationships from each other. All right? God doesn't allow that. Why? Because God knows that when you do, then there will be a temptation for the husband to look for another woman, the woman to look for satisfaction from another man. So even within marriage, God says, now, even if it's for fasting and prayer, do not let it be an extended period where you don't have conjugal relationship. It's dangerous. So God knows that this is, and if you are not given the gift of singlehood, this is something that you know that is difficult to control. Well, even if you're given the gift of singlehood, you still need to be very, very careful. All right? So this is a strong emotion. This is real. The world standards are very, very different from the Christians. God willing, next week as we come back and you submit your questions you have, we will talk about then how to control this lust as a single, as a married person. Let us pray. What do we have here? Top 5 reasons why church dropouts, what church dropouts say, why they stop attending church. Now please remember 66% of, well, I take the American view, they are the most readily available results. They stop attending church at least a year after turning 18. So from